Hello, and welcome to Under 1000. My name's Thomas Flower, and each episode I'll read you a piece of super short fiction. All of the stories are 1,000 words or less. Today, I'll be reading Praxis and Pies. Hey, are you going to be in or around Glasgow on the 5th of December? I'm hosting a queer flash fiction open mic night at Category is Books from 7 p.m. Check out the Under 1000 Facebook page for more details and come join us if you can. It should be a lot of fun. Please be aware that this episode contains strong language, so if that's likely to upset you or anyone you're listening with, then you might want to skip this one. Oh God, I could never eat that. I think the very idea would make an Italian cry. What have Italians got to do with anything? Well, macaroni. There was a video of this Italian chef watching Scottish people making bolognese I saw, and it was hilarious. This guy was practically in tears by the end. And that's why you wouldn't touch a macaroni pie? Well, yeah. I stopped, confused and a little dumbfounded. Who was this guy? I'd literally met him minutes ago, and now here he was shitting on one of life's simple joys just to show that he was so much more sophisticated or whatever. Oh hey, he called out to someone standing behind me. Yasmin, right? I think we met at the Anarchist Book Fair a few months ago. I stood silently, watching the conversation take place. The two chatted for a while, bandying about ideas of praxis and whatnot, until Yasmin made her excuses to go talk to someone else in the thronging crowd. Meanwhile, I sat drinking it in, still confused about how some self-professed leftist radical could show such strange snobbery on this one point. So, about the macaroni pies, I said after a few moments, still determined to get to the bottom of this. What specifically is it you don't like about them? I don't know, they're just so... like they're not exactly high-quality food, are they? Maybe it's something about coming from another culture. It just seems weird and gross to me. So you'd never have one at all? Not even just to try? No, I mean, people who eat those have such a short life expectancy. I wouldn't want that for myself. I just think it's kind of gross to have them. People should eat more like home-cooked food, you know? A few moments later, my head still reeling, I made my excuses and left. Back home, I tried to clear my thoughts, but something about the whole exchange had left me so irritated that it was all I could focus on. There was something so blinkered and condescending about it all that had got to me in a way I hadn't expected. Maybe that was the point, in which case I'd fallen for it hook, line and sinker. But if not, I couldn't really fathom the thought process behind it. How could someone who self-proclaimed as radical, a champion of the working classes, sit so in judgment as to what foods were and weren't deemed acceptable? To me it reeked of pretension, yet in our own conversation he had knocked back the accusation like it was ridiculous. It's not pretentious to want to eat good food. The words floated to the surface of my mind with ease. Maybe he was right. Wanting to have better and nicer things for yourself was no crime, true. Wanting to uplift others to have equal access to those things was a virtue indeed. And yet to me it seemed as though that wasn't the motivating force behind the comments. Someone who disdained the simple macaroni pie didn't do so solely because they thought that everyone should have access to something more nutritional. In my mind, rather, they did it because of its association as working-class food. It is unhealthy, though. That's not wrong, I admitted to myself. Live on a diet of pies alone and you'd be constipated in weeks and having heart problems in years. It's a fact that none of us can get around. And yet still I felt this held little weight with what I'd heard. The blank refusal to admit that there might be any pleasure, any joy to be taken from a food like this felt more like a disdainful snobbery, which saw the food as being on a lower level and therefore rejected it on principle. Instead of attempting to understand how or why this might be valuable to people, feel enjoyable and important to them, even if this value and importance may be somewhat misguided, it instead sought to find the reasons why they were fools for liking such a thing in the first place. Those too blinded by their upbringing to see that they should be having fresh homemade food instead of eating greasy oven fare or takeaway were discarded by this logic as being unable to achieve the status and talent the speaker professed themselves to possess. It was the "why can't everyone be as great as me" of the food opinions. Mostly, I was shocked that someone so interested in crafting an identity as a firebrand radical, as someone seeking to overthrow the social order, could be so invested in enforcing it. For how long had the tastes of those deemed lower in society been shunned and mocked, told to change, for they were stupid to genuinely prefer the things which they liked over more respectable middle-class fare? It seemed bizarre that someone so steeped in theory in this area could be so blind as to not see that their own snobbery played into this long history of believing that anything which is cheap and accessible enough to be affordable to the masses must automatically be bad. Maybe I was overthinking things. I couldn't tell why this comment had got under my skin so much exactly. I tried to let it go, to free my thoughts and fall into sleep somehow. Flashes and snippets of the conversation kept floating back to me, but I pushed them away as best I could, determined to be done with all this now, to let it go and forget about it. I knew I wasn't doing anything other than winding myself up, and eventually I managed to relax my brain into a strange and fitful sleep. That night, I dreamt of endless rows of macaroni pies. Thank you for listening to Under 1000. I'm your host, Thomas Flower. To follow the show online, look for Under 1000 Pod on Twitter or Facebook. If you'd like to support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/under1000pod, where you can sign up to read each month's stories in advance, as well as to have a thank you be read during these credits. The theme music is an instrumental version of In Between Days by Nick Tate and the Sharks. To hear the full song and more from the same EP, go to Nick Tate, NICTATE, and thesharks.bandcamp.com, or search for them on your favourite streaming platform. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and that you'll join me again next time for some more super short fiction.